As I said, I will be brief, and I will start with an introduction on the issue of housing in the Argentinian scenario. Then I will pass on to discuss the housing deficit we are suffering. Next, I will speak about one of the most serious problems facing Argentina, which is slums or shanty towns and urban settlements. After that, I will discuss the impact that immigration is having on the growth of slums and urban settlements. And lastly, I will give you a snapshot of land use, and I will show some conclusions. By way of introduction, or so that we are all on the same page, let me say that housing is the structural basis of societal welfare. It is tightly related to the quality of living, to social peace, to the creation of jobs, and to family and social integration. Housing as a habitat of individuals in particular as a habitat for the individual and the family at large constitutes an element which has a significant weight in the social corpus. Having your own shelter provides stability to a household, and it constitutes and becomes a powerful inclusion tool. The lack of it is identified as one of the factors feeding and contributing to citizen uncertainty, providing a framework for drug consumption, bringing insecurity to those who live in that situation, causing pollution, high sanitation, and overcrowding problems. In this presentation, we cannot ignore the issue of overcrowding precisely and of the social debt. We may not just turn a blind eye to them. What I suggest, and this was the core topic of my editorial article in La Nación newspaper, my suggestion is that we focus on the need to implement a state policy that will bring together all sectors. Coincidences here are well advanced. We lack the political will by the various representatives and political and social sectors to progress in a territory which has always been characterized by steps forward and backwards, which have not allowed for the implementation of long-term policies. I also believe that in events and conferences like these, it is that we have to take the opportunity to become committed so that housing will once again be made part of the government agenda. Unfortunately, housing is not a top priority today, though not ignored, is well below in terms of the importance ascribed to it, and it is not ranking as a priority issue. We therefore have to urgently define a national housing policy that will stretch out along a 20-year horizon.
When we say housing deficit, we are going to think about a timeline, past, present, and future. Housing deficit is a big issue, a long-standing problem that has come up at the very beginning of last century, 1960s, when the immigration of European stock started to create imbalances, to lodge the new immigrants here. To be more precise, when he says the last century is the 1900s. The yellow fever epidemics in 1871, 14,000 casualties, and more than 60,000 inhabitants emigrating from the city of Buenos Aires because of this blight and scourge. So this is a structural deficit. Housing deficit is a structural deficit. And even though much effort has been made in the past to find a solution there too, in order to dampen and cushion this problem, because deficit has become a chronic issue, many measures have been put in place. This is a huge problem, a sizable issue, where all political forces should intervene in order to find an appropriate solution. According to the last census performed by the National Institute of Statistics Argentina, INDEC, in the year 2010, there were 5.4 million people without any kind of sewerage system, 5.7 million people without gas pipelines, direct gas pipe to their homes directly, and 1.9 million people without drinking water services. These indicators clearly show you that we are not only having housing problems as such, but we are having housing structure problems as well, utilities and services. The current housing deficit in Argentina amounts to 3 million units. The last INDEC census in the year 2010 is clearly showing that we are having 2.8 million units. So far, so good. But the estimate produced by professional associations of real estate developers, Argentine Chamber of Construction, figures are even higher than 3 million, 3.5 million. But so far, so good. 3 million is the average figure. The overall population growth makes it necessary for us to add 200,000 housing units on a yearly basis. If we were devising a sort of land use planning in 20 years' time, we should calculate this natural increase, 200,000 housing units, 4 million plus the 3 million of the current deficit, we need 7 million. So in Argentina, the average housing needs for the last 3 to 5 years is the following: building 150,000 units per annum, 100,000 are in the hands of the private sectors, and 50,000 are in the hands of the national government. In Argentina, we call them social interest housing planning in this case. Now, if we are really devising this new plan covering a span of 20 years, we would need a private sector building 200,000 housing units, and the public sector, the federal government, local government, or provincial government producing 150,000 housing units on a yearly basis. And in this way, we reach that amount of 7 million housing units in 20 years' time. Now, we need to reduce this unprecedented pace of growth of shantytowns, lands, and squatter settlements. You know that villas, as we call it here, shantytowns, is absolutely different from housing deficit. When we speak about shanty towns, we have social problems, overcrowding, quality of life, standard of living, which goes beyond the mere fact of admitting that we are suffering from housing deficit. We cannot compare neighborhoods in provinces where houses are very precarious indeed, vis-à-vis what's going on in these shanty towns and squatter settlements. We have to offer better conditions of life for people inhabiting there, a better future for future generations. 1/4 of the Argentine population is living in the greater Buenos Aires, the suburban area, but that suburban area, in this case, is not wealthy. We are referring to squatter settlements. According to the NGO Un Techo para Mi País, a roof for my country, there are more than 100,000 families living in shanty towns, a universe of 2 million people, so we have to limit and restrict the settlement of new people in the different metropolitan rings. So we have to tackle the housing problem on the one hand, we have to try to find the solutions to shanty towns and squatter settlements, and first and foremost, we must try to avoid that these shanty towns keep on growing at an unprecedented pace. Which is the impact of immigration on this scenario? Well, this has a major impact, a significant one, in the growth of these housing problems. First, statistics from the Immigration Bureau show that there has been a sort of exodus of migration, in this case, of a marginal population from different neighboring countries to Argentina, and they also come to a place where they can find Medicare, I mean health care to be more precise, education, and subsidies and grants from the government. Now, living in a villa here in a shanty town is very difficult indeed. They are emigrating, and here they are better than what their own standard of living in their own countries. And this is the reason why we're having so many immigrants into the shanty towns. Here you have the National Bureau of Statistics, Immigration Statistics. You have the different settlement permits and authorizations to remain in the territory of Argentina from the year 2004 onwards. The blue line are initial proceedings in the year 2006 when the new immigration law was enacted, and here in the year 2012 lines are very short because this corresponds to the first quarter of this year, 2012 only. Here you have settlements, initial settlements between 2010 and 2011. And we can notice that there has been a great fluctuation. Bolivia, 47%, Paraguay, 37%, and in the case of Peru, 25%. The same holds true for final settlements. The three countries we have just mentioned are included in the list, and they account for the highest immigration growth, initial and final settlement, Between 2008 and 2010, Paraguayan migration grew by 34%, Bolivian 26%, and he repeats Paraguayan once again 15%. The remaining populations have been growing on a much smaller scale. Here you can see settlements. In fact, these are applications for settlement initiated in this year, 2012. See the significant growth in only 3 months, first quarter. In this table, you can see a summary of all the information that you can see published at the Immigration Bureau webpage. Temporary settlements, which started in 2011, are 128,000. Permanent settlements, 121,000. Temporary settlements, but finally granted 126,000, and the permanent ones that have been granted 128,000. Some temporary ones have been finally granted, and some permanent ones have also been granted. But if you take into account all of those that have been actually granted, plus 50% included in the year 2011, we have 380,000 immigrants into Argentina, 85% bordering countries. As I told you before, neighboring countries, Peru, Paraguay, and Bolivia. 320,000 only in 2011. This is a significant growth vis-à-vis previous years. But just for you to have an idea of the major impact in the field of housing, these 323,000 to be more precise, are requiring to have access to 80,000 new housing units. Compare the 150,000 units that we are producing with the requirements that come from this latest immigration wave. As far as managing the immigration issue, I should say that this is a very difficult problem, because in the year 2006, Argentinian Congress enacted immigration law 25871, and last year an executive order regulating the former Migration Act